Teacher Prize winner of 2018 from Alperton Community School, and also the founder of Artists in Residence charity. Would like to welcome Andria, and thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm very excited to be here, and it's been lovely listening to Jaime. Jaime, it's almost like I see you constantly at these events, isn't it? So you get Jaime, then I come free, I think. And it was just great listening to Mark as well. And I sometimes feel a little bit intimidated. What can a little teacher from a small community provide? Now, I'm actually having a lot of trouble, believe it or not, Mark, listen to this. I'm having quite a lot of trouble today trying to share my technology. So just bear with me for 1 second. Here we go. Can you see my screen? Is it evident? Yeah, it should be there. There we go.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. Okay, so my presentation I'd like to speak and share with you today is the lessons that a tiny little teacher like myself from a small community in London would like to share about what I have learnt over the last few years. And it's been fascinating when we're talking about some of the countries who have really seen deprivation. And the last question that you had to Jaime was, would countries in lower income countries, would they ever get back on track in terms of education? Well, you know, we've been hit in my school, and you know, we are struggling to get those students back on track as well. So it's not just you know, this is affecting every school, every child across the world. So what are the lessons learned? And I think the image here is is unique. It's I've just turned the other way, or I've started to look in a completely different direction. So to give you a little bit of background, this is my world. This is the students that I teach. I work in a school in Brent, which is in London, the borough, the city of London. However, it is the most deprived area in the UK, and many of our students experience high levels of poverty. It's a very, very multicultural society. We have 1,700 students who come to our school every day. But as you can see, it's a really happy environment, happy place. And I've been teaching there for 16 years. I teach art and textiles, and I'm also a member of the leadership team. And the one thing that I've learned since the pandemic is, God, how much I hated teaching at home, how much I hated teaching online. And I think Mark said those little boxes on the screens, I was the one who was pulling my hair out, simply because that is not why I became a teacher. There's something about the classroom, there's something about the environment in a school, seeing students, seeing their body language, watching them talk, watching them communicate, being present, being in that environment, that spirit. It's unique. And working in isolation has been an absolute challenge for me. And I was the one who, when I had to, you know, when the school said, right, we have to go online, I was the one who was like, huh, what do I do? You know, how do I do this? What's the answer? And luckily, a very good friend of mine is an ICT teacher, and so she, bless her, took me under her wing and guided me through how to use Google. Sorry, Mark, we use Google in my school, but luckily that did help us a lot. So the most important thing about the power of our schools is the fact that my job is not just to throw knowledge at them. That, you know, they can do that from a book, they can do that by looking at Google. It's about watching them develop into human beings. And again, what's the most important thing about the school? It's the culture which we have in school. So every single school creates, nurtures their culture. And I think that's very much underestimated and undervalued, because the culture is part of the community that you belong to. And, you know, some schools have got very rich cultures, and some schools have cultures whereby the vision is not very clear. But the school culture is what keeps our young people connected. It's what keeps them resilient, responsible, ready to learn, and human beings which somehow we all connect together. So that's the biggest thing about the power of the classroom, and how sometimes those environments are very hard to replicate. So what did we notice and what were the challenges? So, I mean, we've all spoken about this. First of all, the students who suffered were the students who did not have the technology, who may have had one phone between 6 students or 6 children at home, or they may have had a laptop, but it's a laptop that was, centuries old, no access to Wi-Fi. So we noticed that these students automatically, they were disadvantaged because they couldn't access. And the thing about young people is that when they can't, 90% of them will give up. Students like to have routine. They like to have a timetable. That system keeps them going, keeps them moving forward. And I think by not having that, that's when we lost, and lots of learning and the gaps were created by that particular issue. And then next to that, the other students who we always seem to forget about are the students who are maybe a minority in our schools, but the students with special educational needs. So how inclusive was our learning techniques and the way that we taught? The resources that we just grabbed from the internet, how inclusive were they to engage all our students? Did we differentiate well? Was the quality of our resources there? And right on the bottom of the screen there, you have the most peculiar looking family made out of wood. But what I'm trying to demonstrate there is that the students who did have, the parents, the stable family, the resources, the books, the opportunities, the support in that household, those are the students who managed to stay with us, who were engaged, who did well, who did very, very well, actually, learning at home. However, what we found is that many of our students in our school, this isn't the case. That the students who did suffer from and who, were experiencing domestic violence, and maybe there was no parent supporting them, these are the students that we found that just, fell off the grid. And finally, it's that resources, isn't it? It's the quality of the resources and the quality of teaching. And I have to admit, I've been teaching for 16 years, but nothing ever prepared me for what happened. And, I've, over the last years, I've collected all those, all my resources and the way that I like to teach in the classroom, tweak them a little, but all of those resources, they didn't mean a thing. I could not use them in my classroom. I had to completely reskill, completely learn new ways of teaching, using different resources, different artists, different genres. And that was, for me, the best thing that could have happened. I completely came out of my comfort zone just by having to skill up and knowing that I didn't have the resources. So, we're back on track now. Hopefully, we're getting there. We're really now thinking, okay, let's just now close those gaps. Let's move forward. Let's see how we can make sure that teaching will always be great in the future. However, what is happening in our world? So I just thought that I bring these small clippings for you. So our teachers are leaving. Our teachers are resigning. They are leaving the classroom, and this is a huge problem, because if we have got this massive deficit of our young people, so I think it was 63%, which Jaime said, of students who are not able to read before the age of 10. If our quality teachers are leaving the classroom, who's going to look after those students? What is the future of our generations? Who are we going to employ? Which gaps? And then, if that's the case, then the quality and the size of that gap will increase. So what I think would be very helpful. Now, again, this is teacher voice, and what would be really important is if we had brave leadership taking place, and brave leadership at all levels. So looking at schools leadership, looking at systematic leadership, looking at government leadership. We need to have really brave leaders who are supporting our schools, helping us with our making decisions, providing us with those resources. If they say they're going to provide laptops, they need to be there, who are prioritising the young people. I found that decisions were made we had to wait for a lot of the good decisions to be made, and many head teachers and principals just made them regardless. And I think that's what inspired me, just seeing brave leadership, seeing the quality of leadership, and for that I was completely inspired. The fact that we need to start tapping into our communities. Sometimes schools work in isolation, and I've noticed that I became stronger and I became more inspired and energized and enthused to do my job when I was working with a larger community of teachers outside my classroom, outside my school, maybe outside the country. So I really made sure that I connected and used the local community as well as the extended community. Our teachers need to have access to high quality ongoing CPD, and I think what I'm talking here is CPD that is provided by experienced practitioners who are teaching in the classroom, whereby we can really open our minds to learning from them. I don't think it's good enough to say now, oh, I've been teaching for 16 years, I know everything I know about teaching. No, that would be a mistake. So it's having that mindset of being open and really engaging and seeing what is happening in classrooms, in schools around the corner from you, what's going on, and how can we connect? How can we utilize those communities? Networks are spoken about. The opportunity to be creative. So again, being pushed out of my comfort zone, I had to really think creative. My students didn't have access to any materials at home. They didn't have access to pencils, to paper. So I had to think, what do they have at home that they can engage in, which can be fun, which they can be creative. And sometimes creativity just needs you to pause, to stop, and to think outside the box. And sometimes as teachers, because we're on a hamster wheel, trying to get through the day, trying to teach the curriculum, we don't have that time. So it's about nurturing and making sure that we provide space for creativity to occur. Time, I just mentioned time, resources. So again, those top quality resources. I mean, it's fascinating the amount. I'm quite lucky, where I teach, in the country that I teach, the amount of software and IT and resources that were just being thrown at me from every corner of the earth. I could access anything I wanted. That was amazing. However, sometimes I felt that it was a bit too much, and I wanted instead of me searching for the right material, and if there was a way it was streamlined, that would be wonderful. So it's just looking at resources. How can we make sure the right resources for the right types of schools are being used? Motivation. How do you motivate your teachers? How does this happen when they are teaching in a very different way, in a very different place, at home or wherever? How do you keep them motivated to be inspired to engage the young people? So, again, that's something that we need to have at the back of our minds. What is it that teachers need, want, should have to encourage them to drive forward? And I put the word challenge there because, as I mentioned to you before, I love that feeling of being thrown out of my comfort zone and having to find a different way to teach. I liked being challenged, but it's not just about me feeling challenged. It's about me being challenged by others as well. So making sure that we are open to sharing what we are teaching with others, that we are open to other people watching us teach, seeing us teach, giving us feedback. That our leaders are comfortable enough to challenge us and say, well, Andrea, maybe you need to think about developing this in your classroom. So are we challenging good enough to keep those standards in our schools absolutely high? And I just thought I'd pull out this quote. It made me, I read it and it made me slightly uncomfortable about, my God, they're judging teachers, but I love the end. So the great teacher inspires. And I sat there this afternoon. I thought, actually, I love that. I love the fact that my job is to inspire, because that's exactly what I seem to do all the time. My job is to inspire. My students can learn. They now have the skills from over the last 18 months to research, to see different ways of learning, but what they really need is somebody to inspire them to carry on learning, to have that love of learning. And so, I kind of went on a bit of a tangent. I'm sorry if I'm going on a tangent now, but I decided to research this word inspiration. And I came across this particular definition, and I love the second part, which says the act of inhaling, the act of drawing in air or breathing. Oh my God, you know, if teachers are there to inspire, then that concept of teachers are helping that seed grow, that seed breathe, the future of the countries breathe, develop. Yeah, just let that sit there with you, because that exactly is the role of the teacher, to inspire, to grow, to help human beings become better, develop, and to breathe. And so I can be very modest here. I have evidence. But, you know, what makes you a good teacher? Well, I think for me, what made me a really good teacher, I felt that I was a great teacher, is when, you know, during those dark days of the first lockdown, when that appalling incident happened, and where the rise of Black Lives Matter was born, out of nowhere, my students, or some of my students, reacted, and they reacted by producing these posters, their response to how they were feeling about the issue of Black Lives Matter. Now that for me, you know, we say that our job is to inspire. Well, if this is not inspirational, if this is not bringing that circle round, you know, the fact that our young people can inspire us with their knowledge, which gives us energy to then inspire. I mean, I think that that's quite powerful. So in our classrooms, what do we need to do? Yes, we got the knowledge, we've got the curriculum set, but how do we deliver, engage? Now, if you think about it, we need to close the gap, but does the gap mean just doing more tests and teaching in the same way? Some maybe that works, but for the majority, we probably need things. So first of all, it's about how can we make sure the way is aspirational, that every single child will achieve, that it's not good enough for our teachers to say, well, you know, the whole family came from that council estate, the whole family didn't do well, so he's not going to do well. No, that's wrong. We need to change our language. We need to make sure that our young people aspire. And I can't really quite remember the figure that Mark said about, you know, how many jobs in the future in 2025 will be technology, will be based on technology, but our young people need to have aspiration to know that they can get one of those jobs. And the way to do that is to think about how can we make our lessons more imaginative? How can we use our imagination to really make sure we grasp those young people? Feel, interesting word, right? We've, you know, for the last 2 years, it's like, don't touch, sanitize your hands. But maybe we need to start thinking about how can we re-feel? How can we get them to have that sense again of touch, of connection? Questioning, you know, we can only, I know some of the awful things that happen in some of the houses of our young people, and you know, and you don't want to question, you don't want to even let your mind go there, but our schools and our lessons have got to be places where they feel safe to question, feel safe to ask, but why is this happening? Why should this happen? And teachers need to be in a really comfortable position to be able to help explain that and help solve some of those ideas which young people are struggling with. Isn't this what school's about? Joy and play, right? I mean, you know, we can close the gap, and we can close it by remembering that having fun, playing is such a great way of learning. You know, if I was to say to you, when was the last time you had fun? Many of you say, oh, it was this and it was this, it was this. But if I say to you, what did you eat yesterday? You probably forget. So it's about making sure that never to underestimate the learning energy which joy and play can give. It's good to talk. I've noticed that some of the issues which my young students have, that they're, you know, just talking well, talking articulately was a problem to them. They were speaking in their own languages, and sometimes they're forgetting words and diction. So I think it's you know, making sure that opportunity to communicate is always effective in schools. Creativity I've mentioned, and I've highlighted this twice simply because I think this is something which we need to, as educators, really focus on. And this is the power of making sure that the resources that we're using, the people that we are teaching, the theories that we are teaching, our young people can identify with, that they can see themselves, their cultures within this. If they don't identify with what's happening, what they're learning, they will not connect. And it's quite fascinating. I spoke to a student of mine yesterday. I was looking at her book and I asked her, so why do you enjoy this particular subject? And her answer was, because my teacher, he makes sure that whatever he teaches is really relevant to what we're doing in what's happening in society and what's happening in our community. And I'm able to identify with that. And I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. That's what's inspiring for our young people. Can they identify with who you're teaching and who they are seeing in the classroom? Kindness. Yeah, it's been quite a challenging, tough world. So bringing back that and becoming that kind teacher is something that we should never underestimate. So I don't know if I've got time, but I'm just going to carry on a little bit. Is that okay? Just a few more minutes. This is a piece of artwork from a student of mine, and I'm bringing it back to the end of this presentation, simply because this is a student who really helped me get through quite a challenging few months. I taught her many years ago, and she was from Nepal when she first came to my school, and her work was tiny. She would only draw on the size of a stamp, and my challenge was, come on, draw big, you know, use the whole page. After 5 years, she sat her end of year examinations, her GCSE examinations, and she came into my room with this huge piece of wood. And she said, and when I stared at her, my mouth dropped. I was like, oh my God, are you sure? She said, Miss, I'm going to go big for my examination. And so this is her final piece. This was her examination piece. And in terms of scale, it's 1 meter by 1 meter on a piece of wood, and it's hanging in my office. So that happened about 5 or 6 years ago. And then during lockdown, she called me and she says, Miss, guess what? I'm going to appear on a TV program in the UK called The Great Pottery Throwdown. And what that is, it's a competition, a bit like the Bake Off. But this is a competition whereby potters and ceramicists, they compete. And there she was, my student, on British national TV. So if that wasn't inspiring and made you want to achieve and do your job better, I'm not sure what is. But just to reflect on what are the lessons that I've learned, and some of this, listening to Jaime, there is so much connection there. So first of all, we need to make sure that our schools are open, and students love being in a building with peers, with that routine. That is our priorities. Keep them connected with peers. The second thing is that teaching is an art form that we need to be able to change. We need to be able to respond to adapt. And this needs to be always at high quality level. In terms of high expectations, we must stop and we must change our mindsets that say only this particular group of students will achieve and those won't. No, we need to make sure that everyone is equal in our classrooms, in our schools. Another thing is that environment is key for our young people. So what type of learning environment do they have? We touched on parents. Parents is a huge thing that we need to make sure that with schools, we need to connect them. Yes, the parents who will support, but what about the ones who won't? How can we get them to engage with us? And I think that idea of closing the gap is not just about that knowledge gap of feeding them more knowledge and information. It's actually how they use it. So it's looking at how can we make sure that they're using their social and emotional skills. How are we building the characters of the future? The characters that will then have the skills, the resources to help keeping us joyful and happy, but also to make sure that they are thriving in this new world that we're living in. So I hope that was useful and gave you the perspective from a teacher's point of view.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. It was amazing to hear and very inspiring as the word that you put across our screen. There's a lot of things to think about of what you said. And we have a few questions that we're going to give a few minutes for you to kind of think about and kind of talk to our audience. So one question that we have here is that a lot of students, one of our viewers has said, a lot of our students didn't have access to devices. How did your school handle that, like as in digital devices?
Yeah. So we were told that a delivery was going to come of laptops from the government, but we didn't wait. We just automatically we made phone calls at home, who has, who hasn't. We got the computers from the classrooms, the laptops from the classrooms, and we delivered them to the homes. But that wasn't a good solution. But that wasn't the only solution, because many of these families did not have internet. So we tried to provide dongles as well. For some of these students, we opened up the school as well. We made sure that they just came in, and we had a small group of students who were always in, and these were the vulnerable students. So, but then the challenge was our young people didn't know how to use the devices. So again, it was taking them through that step and that one-to-one tuition, which was done over the phone. So I think the hours of phone calls that were made just went through the roof, but parents were really happy about that. They felt they were happy that the schools were connecting with them.
Great. And just in 1 minute or less, what did you find? Do you find there's a big number of tools out there that is overwhelming as a teacher? One person has asked.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's too much out there and too much of the same thing that's out there. And you feel quite pressured that you need to always know the next thing or be always on top of your game. So how do I cope with that? I just learn from the people who I have in my school. What are they doing? What are they using? What technology? Always going to conferences led by other teachers, so I can see what I can learn and pinch from them, what ideas we can steal. But yes, sometimes there is too much. But then again, it's been useful because we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So it's an interesting challenge, that.
Good.